Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human frigate Defiant Asterisk, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the viewscreen. 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts formed a perfect battle formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming like deadly jewels against the star field. Each ship dwarfed the human vessel by a factor of 10, bristling with energy weapons that could vaporize a small moon. "They're hailing us, Commander," reported Lieutenant Chen from the communications station. Her voice carried a tremor that she couldn't quite hide. The entire bridge crew felt the weight of the moment. This was humanity's first official contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and it wasn't going well. Jake adjusted his worn leather holster, feeling the familiar weight of his plasma sidearm. The weapon had been his father's and his grandfather's before that. 3 generations of Morrison men had carried this particular gun through conflicts across human space. It was old-fashioned by current standards, built with earth metals and human engineering, but it had never failed him. "Put them through," Jake ordered, straightening his uniform jacket. The viewscreen shimmered, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Vexthara, Supreme Commander of the Zephyrian Third Fleet. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and skin that shifted between deep purple and black like oil on water. His primary eyes glowed amber, while his secondary set remained fixed on tactical displays only he could see. "Human vessel," Admiral Vexthara's voice boomed through the bridge speakers, the universal translator struggling with the alien's guttural tones. "You have violated Zephyrian space. Your presence here is an act of war against the Empire. Prepare to surrender your ship and submit to interrogation." Jake stepped forward, his boots clicking on the metal deck plating. "Admiral, we're on a diplomatic mission. Our ship carries peace envoys from the United Terran Federation. We come seeking dialogue, not conflict." The alien admiral's laugh was like grinding metal. "Humans speak of peace while carrying weapons of war. You will disarm yourselves immediately and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your pathetic vessel." "We're willing to talk," Jake replied evenly, "but we won't surrender our ship or our crew to anyone. If you want to discuss terms, we can arrange a meeting on neutral ground." Admiral Vexthara's secondary eyes suddenly focused on Jake with laser intensity. "You dare negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire? You, a mere human, think yourself equal to a superior species. Your arrogance will be your downfall, primitive creature." The insult hung in the air like a physical thing. Jake felt his jaw clench, but he maintained his composure. Around him, his crew tensed. They'd all heard the stories about Zephyrian superiority complexes, how they viewed every other species as inferior, but hearing it firsthand still stung. "We believe all sentient species deserve respect," Jake said carefully. "Perhaps we can find common ground despite our differences." "Common ground?" The Admiral's forearms spread wide in what might have been amusement. "Humans are barely evolved beyond throwing rocks and banging sticks together. Your technology is laughably primitive. Your weapons are crude. Your ships are held together with metal and desperation. You have nothing to offer the Empire except entertainment as we crush you beneath our superior might." Lieutenant Chen whispered urgently from her station, "Commander, they're powering weapons. All 12 ships are targeting us." Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his plasma gun, a habit born from years of combat experience. The gesture wasn't threatening, merely automatic, but Admiral Vexthara's primary eyes immediately locked onto the movement. "What is that crude device you carry, human?" the Admiral demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Is that what passes for a weapon among your species?" Jake looked down at his sidearm, then back at the viewscreen. "It's a plasma gun, Admiral, standard issue for human fleet officers." The alien's laughter erupted again, this time joined by sounds of amusement from other Zephyrians visible in the background of their bridge. "A plasma gun? Made by humans? This is rich beyond measure. You think that primitive toy could threaten a member of the Imperial fleet?" "It served me well enough," Jake replied quietly. "Show me this pathetic excuse for a weapon," Admiral Vexthara commanded. "I wish to see what humans consider advanced technology. Perhaps it will provide some amusement before I destroy your ship." Jake hesitated. Every instinct screamed against revealing anything about human technology to a potential enemy. But they were outgunned 12-1, and perhaps showing respect for the Admiral's curiosity might buy them some time to negotiate. Slowly, Jake drew the plasma gun from its holster. The weapon was compact but elegant in its simplicity, with a matte black finish and ergonomic grip designed for human hands. Indicator lights showed full charge and ready status. He held it carefully, finger well away from the trigger. "Behold the mighty human weapon," Admiral Vexthara announced to his crew with mock ceremony. "Observe how crude it appears, how primitive its construction. This is what these inferior beings consider advanced warfare technology." The alien's tone grew more serious. "Human commander, I will give you one opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of Zephyrian engineering. Transport that toy weapon to my ship immediately. I wish to examine it personally and show you the vast gulf between your primitive technology and our advanced weaponry." Jake's grip tightened on the gun. Something in the Admiral's tone set off warning bells in his mind. "I appreciate your interest, Admiral, but this weapon has personal value to me. Perhaps we could arrange for your technicians to examine some of our other equipment instead." "You refuse my direct order." The Admiral's voice turned deadly cold. All four of his hands flexed, claws extending. "Human, you will transport that weapon to my ship immediately, or I will take it from your corpse after I reduce your vessel to expanding plasma." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Jake's crew looked to him, waiting for orders. Lieutenant Chen's hand hovered over the communications console, ready to send a distress signal that would never reach Earth in time to matter. Jake studied the alien Admiral's face, reading the cruel anticipation in those amber eyes. This wasn't about examining human technology. This was about humiliation, about forcing humans to submit to Zephyrian superiority. The Admiral wanted to take something personal from Jake as a symbol of human weakness. "No," Jake said simply. The single word seemed to echo across both bridges. Admiral Vexthara's eyes widened slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. "What did you say, human?" "I said no." Jake's voice remained calm and steady. "This weapon belongs to me and my family. It's not for trade, examination, or surrender. If you want to discuss our diplomatic mission, we can do that. If you want to fight, we'll fight, but you're not taking this gun." The alien Admiral's secondary eyes began to glow with the same amber light as his primary set, a sign of extreme agitation. Around him, his crew members chittered and clicked in their native language, sounds the translator couldn't process. "Human," Admiral Vexthara said slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you have made a grave error. I will board your ship personally and take that weapon from your dead hands. And when I do, I will use it to execute the rest of your crew one by one, showing them the price of human arrogance." Jake holstered his plasma gun with deliberate care. "You're welcome to try, Admiral, but I should warn you about something first." "Warn me?" The alien's laugh was harsh and bitter. "What could a primitive human possibly warn a Zephyrian admiral about?" Jake's smile was thin and cold. "That gun has been in my family for 3 generations. It's been through more battles than you've probably seen in your entire career. And in all that time, in all those fights, it's never once failed to stop whatever was trying to kill the person carrying it." "Empty threats from an inferior species," Admiral Vexthara snarled. "Prepare for boarding, human. Your education in Zephyrian superiority begins now." The transmission cut off, leaving Jake's bridge in tense silence. Through the view screen, they could see the Zephyrian flagship launching boarding pods, each one bristling with enough firepower to level a city block. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen said quietly, "what are your orders?" Jake looked around at his crew, seeing fear mixed with determination in their faces. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and about to face an enemy that viewed them as barely sentient animals. But they were still human, still fighting for something larger than themselves. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "And someone get me a direct line to Earth Command. If we're going down, I want them to know exactly what happened here." As alarm klaxons began to wail throughout the ship, Jake touched his plasma gun one more time. Admiral Vexthara was about to learn something important about human weapons, human engineering, and human stubbornness. The lesson might cost Jake his life, but it would be worth it to wipe that superior smirk off the alien's face. The boarding pods struck the *Defiance* hull like metallic meteors, their fusion torches cutting through the outer armor plating with surgical precision. Jake Morrison stood in the main corridor outside the airlock, his plasma gun drawn and ready. Behind him, 12 crew members had taken defensive positions, armed with pulse rifles and whatever else they could find. Cutting through the inner hull now, Commander, reported Sergeant Mills from behind an overturned cargo container. The grizzled Marine had served with Jake for 5 years and had never shown fear in combat. Today, sweat beaded on his forehead as he watched the white-hot circle of molten metal grow larger. The outer airlock door exploded inward with a shower of sparks and superheated metal fragments. Through the smoke and debris stepped Admiral Vexthara himself, flanked by 6 Zephyrian warriors in powered combat armor. Each alien stood nearly 9 feet tall in their mechanical suits, bristling with energy weapons and enhanced with technology that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. "Cease your resistance," Admiral Vexthara commanded, his voice amplified by his armor's speakers. "Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. Continue this futile struggle and I will ensure your suffering lasts for days." Jake stepped forward, his plasma gun held low but ready. "Admiral, you're boarding a diplomatic vessel in neutral space. This is an act of war against the United Terran Federation." The alien's laugh boomed through the corridor. "War? This is not war, human. This is an extermination. Your species lacks the intelligence to wage actual war against the Empire." Admiral Vexthara's 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency, drawing what looked like a crystalline staff that hummed with barely contained energy. The weapon was obviously of advanced design, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Power readings from the device made Jake's tactical display go haywire. "Observe primitive creatures," the Admiral announced, raising his staff. "This is a Zephyrian plasma devastator capable of reducing your entire ship to component atoms. Your crude weapons cannot even scratch the surface of our technology." Without warning, he fired at the bulkhead beside Jake's head. The energy beam punched through 2 feet of reinforced steel like it was paper, leaving a perfectly smooth hole that glowed cherry red around the edges. The display of power was impressive and terrifying. "Now," Admiral Vexthara continued, turning his attention back to Jake, "surrender that pathetic toy you call a weapon. I grow tired of this charade." Jake looked down at his plasma gun, then back at the towering alien. The weight difference was absurd. Admiral Vexthara stood nearly 4 feet taller than him, had 4 arms instead of 2, and wore armor that probably cost more than Jake's entire ship. His weapon could vaporize cities while Jake's could barely punch through personal armor. "You really want to see this gun?" Jake asked quietly. "I wish to demonstrate the futility of human resistance," the Admiral replied. "Your weapon represents everything weak and inferior about your species. When I crush it in my bare hands, your crew will understand their place in the galactic hierarchy." Jake's crew shifted nervously behind their cover. They could all see the tactical readouts showing the overwhelming superiority of Zephyrian technology. Some of them were already starting to lower their weapons, accepting the inevitable. "All right," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the corridor. "You want to examine human engineering? Here's your chance." He tossed the plasma gun through the air toward Admiral Vexthara. The weapon spun end over end, its matte black surface catching the harsh lighting of the ship's emergency illumination. The Admiral's 4 hands moved with lightning speed, catching the gun in his upper right manipulator. "Finally," Admiral Vexthara said with satisfaction, "now you will witness the superiority of Zephyrian physiology over human craftsmanship." The alien's clawed hand closed around the plasma gun's grip. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Admiral Vexthara began to squeeze, applying the crushing force that Zephyrian anatomy was famous for. His species could exert pressures that would turn most materials to powder. The first sign something was wrong came when the Admiral's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to puzzlement. His hand was squeezing harder now, the powered servos in his armor whining with effort. The plasma gun should have crumpled like tissue paper. Instead, it remained perfectly intact. "What manner of material is this?" Admiral Vexthara muttered, examining the weapon more closely. The grip showed no signs of deformation despite the tremendous pressure being applied. If anything, the gun seemed to be designed to withstand exactly this kind of abuse. Jake smiled grimly. "That's Earth steel, Admiral. Specifically, it's a titanium steel alloy developed in the asteroid mining colonies. It's designed to work in environments where equipment failure means death. We call it stubborn metal because it refuses to break when you need it most." Admiral Vexthara's secondary eyes flared with anger. "Impossible! No primitive alloy could withstand Zephyrian strength. He applied more pressure, his armor's power systems groaning with the effort. The plasma gun remained unchanged. The grip assembly is rated for 3,000 pounds per square inch, Jake continued conversationally. The barrel can handle internal pressures that would rupture most ship hulls, and the trigger mechanism, well, that's where things get interesting. The Admiral was now applying his full strength to the weapon, all four hands working together to crush the stubborn device. Sweat beaded on his alien features as his armor systems warned of power drain from the sustained effort. Around him, his warriors shifted uncomfortably, clearly disturbed by their leader's failure to destroy a simple human weapon. "You see," Jake explained, his voice carrying a hint of pride, "my grandfather was an engineer before he joined the Colonial Defense Force. He believed in building things to last. That trigger mechanism you're trying to activate, it's keyed to human neural patterns, specifically Morrison family neural patterns." Admiral Vexthara's eyes widened in sudden understanding. "You dare suggest that human weapons contain security measures beyond Zephyrian comprehension?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Jake replied. "I'm telling you that gun won't fire for anyone except me, my father, or my grandfather, and since you're neither human nor family, you're out of luck." The alien Admiral's rage was now visible as a purple flush spreading across his skin. His crushing grip on the plasma gun intensified, powered armor servos screaming in protest. "I will break this device through sheer force if necessary. Your primitive security measures cannot withstand superior Zephyrian technology." That's when Jake delivered the final piece of information with the timing of a master comedian. "Oh, and Admiral, there's one more thing about that particular gun you should probably know." "What?" Admiral Vexthara snarled, his voice distorted by strain and fury. "The grip sensor detects unauthorized access attempts. After 30 seconds of incorrect neural patterns, it activates the anti-theft system." The Admiral's crushing grip faltered for just a moment. Anti-theft system. Jake's smile was now openly mocking. 3 generations of Morrison men have carried that gun through gang wars, pirate raids, and colonial uprisings. You think we design it without protection against being stolen? Admiral Vexthara looked down at the weapon in his hands with sudden concern. The grip was now warm to the touch, and small indicator lights that had been dark were beginning to glow amber. A soft, humming sound was growing steadily louder. "What does this anti-theft system do, human?" the Admiral demanded. Jake's answer was delivered with perfect timing. "It delivers a massive electrical shock designed to incapacitate anyone trying to steal the weapon. The charge is calibrated for human physiology, of course. I have no idea what it might do to a Zephyrian nervous system." The warning lights on the plasma gun shifted from amber to red. The humming sound became a high-pitched whine that made several of the Zephyrian warriors step backward in alarm. Admiral Vexthara tried to release the weapon, but his armor's enhanced grip servos had locked onto the gun's surface and wouldn't disengage. "Disconnect your manipulators," he barked at his armor's AI system. The computer responded with an error tone that translated roughly to unable to comply. "That's the beautiful part," Jake observed. "The anti-theft field interferes with most electronic systems. Your armor probably thinks it's protecting you by maintaining its grip on what it sees as a friendly weapon." Admiral Vexthara's secondary eyes were now blazing with panic as well as rage. The whining sound from the plasma gun reached a crescendo. Every Zephyrian in the corridor took another step backward, recognizing the warning signs of an impending energy discharge. "How do I stop this device?" the Admiral shouted. Jake shrugged. "Easy, just let go of the gun and step away. Of course, your armor has to cooperate with that plan." The plasma gun's anti-theft system reached full charge with an ominous electronic chirp that sounded almost cheerful. Admiral Vexthara had just enough time to realize the full magnitude of his mistake before 50,000 volts of specifically tuned electrical energy discharged directly into his nervous system. The electrical discharge from Jake Morrison's plasma gun lit up the corridor like a miniature lightning storm. Admiral Vexthara's agonized scream echoed off the metal bulkheads as 50,000 volts coursed through his enhanced physiology. The alien's 4 arms spasmed uncontrollably, his claws scraping sparks from the deck plating as his nervous system overloaded. Zephyrian warriors scrambled backward, their own armor systems flashing warning signals as electromagnetic interference from the discharge played havoc with their electronics. The Admiral's powered combat suit sparked and smoked, its advanced servos grinding to a halt as circuit breakers tripped throughout the system. "Admiral," one of the warriors shouted, raising his weapon toward Jake. But before he could fire, his suit's targeting system crashed completely, leaving him blind and deaf inside his technological shell. Admiral Vexthara collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from the joints of his armor. The plasma gun fell from his nerveless grip, clattering to the deck with a metallic ring that seemed to echo louder than the screams. The weapon's indicator lights shifted from angry red back to peaceful blue, its anti-theft system satisfied that the threat had been neutralized. "Medical emergency on the flagship," came a panicked transmission over the Zephyrian communication channels. "The Admiral is down. Repeat, Admiral Vexthara is incapacitated." Jake stepped forward and calmly retrieved his plasma gun, checking it for damage. The weapon appeared completely unharmed by its electrical discharge, exactly as it had been designed. He holstered it with practiced ease while around him, chaos reigned among the boarding party. "You should probably call for medical assistance," Jake suggested helpfully to the nearest Zephyrian warrior. "That shock was calibrated to stop a human heart, but I'm not sure what it does to your species' cardiovascular system." Admiral Vexthara was now convulsing on the deck, his armor's life support systems struggling to stabilize his vital signs. Purple blood seeped from his mouth, and his forearms twitched sporadically. The proud warrior who had boarded the ship minutes earlier was reduced to a broken figure whose own advanced technology had become his prison. "What did you do to him?" demanded the lead Zephyrian warrior, his voice distorted by electronic interference still plaguing his suit's communication system. "I didn't do anything," Jake replied truthfully. "He grabbed my gun despite multiple warnings. The anti-theft system activated exactly as designed. This is entirely his own fault." Through the ship's communication system, frantic voices could be heard coordinating emergency medical teams on the Zephyrian flagship. The boarding party's confident assault had turned into a desperate rescue mission as their leader writhed helplessly on the human vessel's deck. Sergeant Mills emerged from behind his cover, pulse rifle still trained on the alien warriors. "Commander, what are your orders?" Jake looked around at the scene of confusion and panic. The mighty Zephyrian Empire's representatives were in complete disarray, their advanced weapons useless, and their leader incapacitated by what they had dismissed as primitive human technology. "Sergeant, escort these warriors back to their pods," Jake ordered, "and make sure they take their Admiral with them. He needs medical attention that we can't provide." "Sir, shouldn't we take them prisoner?" asked Lieutenant Chen from the corridor entrance. "No," Jake said firmly. "We're not starting an interstellar war because their Admiral was too arrogant to listen to safety warnings. Besides, I think we've made our point." The Zephyrian warriors struggled to lift their leader's armored form, their own suits still malfunctioning from the electromagnetic pulse. It took 4 of them to carry Admiral Vexthara's limp body, and they moved with obvious difficulty as their enhanced strength systems worked only intermittently. "Wait," Jake called out as they reached the airlock. The aliens turned toward him with what he assumed was wariness, though their expressions were hidden behind armor visors. "Tell your fleet command something for me." The lead warrior nodded reluctantly. "Human weapons aren't designed to be pretty or impressive," Jake said. "They're designed to work when everything else fails. My plasma gun doesn't look like much compared to your energy staffs and devastator cannons, but it does exactly what it's supposed to do every single time. That's human engineering in a nutshell." The Zephyrians said nothing, but Jake could see them processing this information. Their entire worldview had just been challenged by a simple sidearm that had effortlessly defeated their most advanced military technology. As the boarding party retreated to their pods with Admiral Vexthara's unconscious form, emergency communications continued to flood the Zephyrian fleet channels. Medical teams were standing by, senior officers were demanding updates, and somewhere in the chaos, someone was trying to figure out how a primitive human weapon had brought down their supreme commander. "Bridge to Commander Morrison," came Lieutenant Chen's voice over the intercom. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the Zephyrian fleet. They're demanding to know what we did to Admiral Vexthara." Jake made his way back to the bridge, noting the damage from the boarding action. Scorch marks on the bulkheads, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows, and the acrid smell of burned electronics reminded him that this confrontation was far from over. "Put me through to the Zephyrian Fleet Command," he ordered as he settled into his captain's chair. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the flagship. Instead of Admiral Vexthara's imposing presence, a younger Zephyrian officer appeared on screen. This one had only 2 arms and smaller stature, clearly a subordinate who had suddenly been thrust into command of a fleet engagement. "Human vessel," the officer began, his voice uncertain. "I am Sub-Admiral Kexnella, acting fleet commander. What have you done to Admiral Vexthara? Our medical teams report severe neural trauma consistent with energy weapon discharge." "Sub-Admiral," Jake replied formally, "Admiral Vexthara suffered an accidental injury while examining human equipment. He ignored multiple safety warnings and activated an anti-theft system. We warned him about the dangers, but he chose to proceed anyway." "You attacked a Zephyrian fleet, Admiral?" Sub-Admiral Kexnella's voice rose with indignation. "This is an act of war." "No," Jake corrected calmly. "This is what happens when someone tries to steal from a human. Your Admiral demanded to examine my personal weapon, then attempted to destroy it through brute force. The weapon defended itself exactly as designed." The young Zephyrian officer seemed to struggle with this concept. In their society, superior officers took what they wanted from inferior beings without consequence. The idea that a weapon might resist such treatment was foreign to their understanding. "Admiral Vexthara is the supreme military commander of this sector," Sub-Admiral Kexnella protested. "No primitive device should be able to harm him." Jake's expression hardened. "That primitive device has been protecting my family for 3 generations. It survived gang wars on the mining stations, pirate raids in the outer colonies, and more battles than your Admiral has probably seen in his entire career. It doesn't care about military rank or species superiority. It only cares about doing its job." Through the communication channel, they could hear urgent medical reports in the background. Admiral Vexthara was alive but unconscious, his nervous system struggling to recover from the massive electrical shock. Advanced Zephyrian medicine was working to stabilize him, but the prognosis remained uncertain. "What do you want, human?" Sub-Admiral Kexnella asked finally. "What are your demands for this unprovoked attack?" "I don't want anything," Jake replied. "You came here threatening war, demanding surrender, and insulting my species. All I did was defend my property when your Admiral tried to steal it. If anyone has demands to make, it should be me." The young officer's secondary eyes flared with anger. "You dare make demands of the Zephyrian Empire?" "Actually, yes," Jake said with growing confidence. "Your Admiral committed acts of piracy against a diplomatic vessel in neutral space. He threatened the lives of my crew and attempted theft of personal property. By any definition of interstellar law, he was the aggressor here." Sub-Admiral Kexnella fell silent, clearly struggling with the implications. The Zephyrian Empire had built its reputation on technological superiority and military might. The idea that a single human with a simple plasma gun could defeat their most advanced admiral was unthinkable. "Furthermore," Jake continued, "your fleet is still targeting my ship with weapons of war. That constitutes a continued act of aggression against the United Terran Federation. I demand that you stand down your weapons immediately and allow us to complete our diplomatic mission." "The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species," the Sub-Admiral said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jake smiled grimly. "Your Admiral thought we were inferior too. How did that work out for him?" The question hung in the air like a physical challenge. On screens throughout the Zephyrian fleet, officers and crew members had watched their supreme commander reduced to a helpless figure by human technology they had dismissed as primitive. The psychological impact of that image was spreading through their ranks like wildfire. "I will confer with my senior staff," Sub-Admiral Kexnella said finally. "This situation requires careful consideration." "Take all the time you need," Jake replied. "But remember that Earth Command is expecting a full report on this encounter. If anything happens to my ship or crew, they'll know exactly who was responsible." The transmission ended, leaving Jake's bridge in tense silence. Outside, the Zephyrian fleet maintained its threatening formation, but something fundamental had changed. The aliens' confidence had been shattered by a simple demonstration of human stubbornness and engineering pragmatism. Sub-Admiral Kexnella stood in the center of the Zephyrian flagship's command deck, surrounded by senior officers whose expressions ranged from confusion to outright panic. The massive viewscreen showed Admiral Vexthara in the medical bay, unconscious and connected to life support systems that hummed and beeped with urgent electronic rhythms. "Report," Kexnella commanded, his voice barely steady. Chief Medical Officer Vexarna approached, her forearms moving nervously as she consulted her diagnostic tablet. The Admiral's nervous system suffered massive electrical trauma. The discharge pattern is unlike anything in our medical databases. It appears to have been specifically calibrated to disrupt neural pathways while avoiding permanent brain damage. "Explain," the Sub-Admiral demanded. "The human weapon delivered exactly enough electrical energy to incapacitate without killing," Vexarna continued. "This suggests a level of precision in their engineering that we previously thought impossible for their species. The discharge wasn't random violence, it was surgical in its application." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Around the command deck, junior officers exchanged worried glances. The idea that humans could design weapons with such sophisticated non-lethal capabilities challenged everything they had been taught about the primitives from Earth. "Sub-Admiral," called out Navigation Officer Rixthon from his station, "we're receiving status reports from the other ships in the fleet. Crew morale is dropping rapidly. Word is spreading about what happened to Admiral Vexthara." Kexnella's secondary eyes flared with annoyance. "Explain the situation to all ship commanders. One human weapon malfunctioned and caused an accident. This changes nothing about our mission or our superiority." "Sir," Rixthon replied hesitantly, "the crew are asking questions. If human weapons can defeat our most advanced admiral, what else might we have underestimated about their capabilities?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Kexnella had been wondering the same thing, but hearing it voiced aloud made it somehow more real and more threatening. Chief Tactical Officer Zexmira stepped forward, her armor clanking against the deck plating. "Sub-Admiral, I've been analyzing the electromagnetic signature from the human weapon. The technology appears to be far more sophisticated than our initial assessments suggested." "How so?" "The anti-theft system incorporates neural pattern recognition, biometric security, electromagnetic pulse generation, and selective targeting algorithms. These are features we associate with our most advanced military technology, not primitive sidearms." Kexnella felt his confidence cracking like ice under pressure. "You're suggesting that human weapons are actually advanced technology disguised as primitive tools." "I'm suggesting we may have completely misunderstood human engineering philosophy," Zexmira replied. "They don't design weapons to look impressive. They design them to work reliably under any conditions. The plasma gun that incapacitated Admiral Vexthara is probably representative of standard human military equipment." The bridge crew absorbed this information with visible unease. Several officers checked their own weapon systems, suddenly uncertain about their supposed technological superiority. "Sub-Admiral," came a voice from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. They're responding to the human ship's distress signal." Kexnella felt his stomach drop. "What kind of response?" "Unknown, sir. The transmission is heavily encrypted, but our sensors detect multiple ships entering this system. Large ships." Through the viewscreen, new contacts began appearing on the tactical display. One by one, human vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Each ship was smaller than the Zephyrian dreadnoughts, but they moved with purpose and precision that spoke of experienced crews and proven technology. "How many ships?" Kexnella asked quietly. 15 so far, sir, and they're still coming." The human fleet took up formation with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated like a well-rehearsed dance. These weren't the crude, desperate maneuvers that Zephyrian intelligence had predicted. These were the tactics of a military force that had fought real wars and won them. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the human ships are powering weapons and shields. Their energy signatures are unusual." "Unusual how?" "They're using technologies we don't recognize. Power outputs are higher than predicted, and their targeting systems are actively scanning our fleet with sensor beams that penetrate our stealth fields. Kexnella watched the tactical display with growing dread. The confident superiority he had felt just hours ago was evaporating like moisture in vacuum. The humans weren't behaving like primitives at all. They were acting like a competent military force responding to a threat against their personnel. "Communication from the human flagship," announced the communications officer. "They're requesting immediate conference with our fleet commander." "Put them through," Kexnella ordered, straightening his uniform and trying to project authority he no longer felt. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of a human dreadnought. The vessel's command center was stark and functional, lacking the ornate decorations that marked Zephyrian ships. But the crew moved with quiet efficiency, and their equipment hummed with barely contained power. A human female in Admiral's insignia stepped into view. She appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the United Terran Federation's 7th Fleet," she announced. "You are currently threatening one of our diplomatic vessels and holding our personnel under hostile conditions. You have exactly 60 seconds to explain your actions before I classify this as an act of war." Kexnella's throat felt dry as desert sand. "Admiral Chen, I am Sub-Admiral Kexnella of the Zephyrian 3rd Fleet. We were conducting routine border patrol when we encountered your ship in restricted space." "Restricted by whom?" Admiral Chen asked coldly. "This system has been designated neutral territory by the Galactic Council for diplomatic meetings. Your presence here with weapons powered and targeting our ship constitutes a clear violation of interstellar law." "Our fleet admiral was injured during negotiations," Kexnella replied, grasping for any explanation that might diffuse the situation. "We require medical assistance for our commander." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "According to our records, Admiral Vexthara was injured while attempting to forcibly confiscate personal property from Commander Morrison. The injury occurred when he ignored multiple safety warnings about human weapon systems." The casual way she stated these facts made it clear that the humans had been monitoring all communications. Kexnella realized that his fleet's supposedly secure channels had been compromised from the beginning. "Commander Morrison defended his property using non-lethal force after your admiral threatened violence against our diplomatic mission," Admiral Chen continued. "By any reasonable standard, your admiral was the aggressor in this encounter." "The Zephyrian Empire does not recognize human authority in this matter," Kexnella said, but his words sounded hollow even to him. "The Zephyrian Empire doesn't have a choice," Admiral Chen replied flatly. "You have two options, Sub-Admiral. You can withdraw your fleet immediately and file a formal complaint through diplomatic channels, or you can explain to your government why you started an interstellar war because your admiral was too arrogant to respect simple safety procedures." Through his tactical displays, Kexnella could see that more human ships were still arriving. The Earth fleet now outnumbered his own forces, and their formation suggested combat experience that his crews lacked. Worse, the confidence of his own officers was crumbling as reports filtered in from throughout the fleet. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "the crew are requesting permission to stand down from battle stations. Morale is at critical levels." Kexnella looked around his bridge at officers who had lost faith in their supposed superiority. The humans had shattered more than Admiral Vexthara's hand. They had broken the fundamental assumptions that held the Zephyrian military together. "Admiral Chen," Kexnella said finally, his voice heavy with defeat, "what assurances can you provide for Admiral Vexthara's medical care?" "Our medical teams will provide whatever assistance your personnel require," she replied. "But your admiral will face formal charges for his actions here today. Attempted piracy, threatening diplomatic personnel, and violations of neutral space agreements are serious crimes under galactic law." The words hit Kexnella like physical blows. Not only had they lost this confrontation, but their supreme commander would face trial for his actions. The political ramifications would echo through the Empire for decades. "Furthermore," Admiral Chen continued, "all Zephyrian military personnel involved in this incident will be required to attend mandatory education sessions on interstellar law and diplomatic protocol. Your ignorance of proper procedures is not an excuse for criminal behavior. Kexnella closed his secondary eyes in shame. The mighty Zephyrian Empire was being lectured on proper behavior by the species they had dismissed as primitive. The irony was bitter beyond measure. "Do you require time to consider your options?" Admiral Chen asked with mock courtesy. Looking at his demoralized crew, and knowing that Admiral Vexthara's condition was stable but critical, Kexnella realized he had no real choice. The humans held all the advantages now, technological, legal, and moral. "No, Admiral," he said quietly. "We will comply with your requirements." 3 days later, Commander Jake Morrison stood in the medical bay of the human flagship Indomitable, watching Zephyrian medical technicians work alongside human doctors to stabilize Admiral Vexthara. The alien's condition had improved dramatically, but his pride remained in critical condition. "His nervous system is responding well to the combined treatment protocol," reported Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the human fleet's chief medical officer. "The neural pathways are regenerating faster than we initially predicted. Zephyrian physiology is remarkably resilient." Admiral Vexthara's 4 eyes tracked Jake's movement as he approached the medical bed. The mighty alien commander who had boarded the Defiant with such arrogance now looked diminished, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped softly in the sterile air. "Commander Morrison," Vexthara said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I request permission to speak with you privately." Jake nodded to the medical staff, who withdrew to give them space. The alien admiral struggled to sit up, his movements still unsteady from the electrical trauma his nervous system had endured. "I have spent the past 3 days reviewing the technical specifications of your plasma weapon," Vexthara began slowly. "Our engineers have been forced to completely revise their assessments of human technology." "Oh," Jake replied, settling into a chair beside the medical bed. "The device I attempted to destroy contains technology that our most advanced laboratories would struggle to replicate," the Admiral continued. "The neural pattern recognition system alone incorporates principles that we are only beginning to understand. How is this possible for a species we considered primitive?" Jake pulled out his plasma gun and set it on the bedside table where Vexthara could see it clearly. The weapon looked exactly as it had before, simple, functional, and utterly unpretentious. "Admiral, that's where you made your first mistake," Jake explained. "You assumed that impressive appearance equals advanced capability. Human engineers don't design weapons to look fancy. We design them to work when everything else fails." Vexthara's secondary eyes focused on the gun with something approaching reverence. "But the sophistication of the internal systems, the integration of multiple technologies, this suggests manufacturing capabilities far beyond what our intelligence reports indicated. Every human weapon is built by people who might have to depend on it to save their lives," Jake continued. "When failure means death, you don't cut corners or sacrifice functionality for appearance. You build the best possible tool and you make sure it works every single time." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Through the medical bay's viewports, both men could see the combined human and Zephyrian fleets maintaining a careful formation as diplomatic negotiations continued. "Commander," Vexthara said finally, "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Why did your weapon merely incapacitate me? With the power levels involved, it could easily have been lethal." Jake's expression softened slightly. "Because you weren't really trying to kill me, Admiral. You were trying to humiliate me and prove a point about Zephyrian superiority. The anti-theft system is programmed to match the threat level. If you had been genuinely trying to murder me, the response would have been very different." "You mean the electrical discharge was calibrated to my intentions?" "Among other things, yes. The gun scans neural patterns, stress hormones, electromagnetic fields from your armor, and about 50 other variables to determine appropriate response levels. It's not just a weapon, it's an intelligent defensive system." Admiral Vexthara's 4 arms moved restlessly as he struggled with this concept. "Our weapons are designed to destroy completely. The idea of measured response based on threat assessment is alien to our military philosophy." "That's the difference between warriors and soldiers," Jake observed. "Warriors fight for glory and dominance. Soldiers fight to protect something they care about. When you're protecting people instead of pursuing conquest, you learn to use exactly as much force as necessary and no more. Through the medical bay's communication system, they could hear updates from the ongoing negotiations. Sub-Admiral Kexnella was working with Admiral Chen to establish new protocols for future encounters between their species. The tone was formal but respectful, a dramatic change from the hostility that had marked their first meeting. "Commander," Vexthara said suddenly, "I must know something. How many other human technologies have we completely misunderstood?" Jake's smile was grim but not unkind. "Probably all of them, Admiral. We don't build starships to impress people with our engineering prowess. We build them to carry families safely between the stars. We don't design weapons to demonstrate our superiority. We design them to bring our people home alive. Everything we make has to work perfectly when lives depend on it." The implications of this statement settled over the alien Admiral like a heavy blanket. If the humans approached all their technology with the same practical philosophy that had created Jake's plasma gun, then Zephyrian intelligence had completely misjudged the species' true capabilities. "Your people must think us very foolish," Vexthara said quietly. "Actually, no," Jake replied. "We think you're smart enough to learn from this experience. Your engineers are already working with ours to understand the principles behind our weapon systems. Your medical staff are sharing techniques that saved your life. That doesn't sound foolish to me. That sounds like the beginning of wisdom." Admiral Vexthara attempted to sit up straighter, his dignity slowly returning despite his weakened condition. "If the Empire is to coexist with humanity, we must fundamentally reconsider our assumptions about your species." "That's probably a good idea," Jake agreed. "But it works both ways. We had you figured for another aggressive empire that only understood force. Turns out you're capable of much more than that." Through the viewports, they could see Zephyrian and human technicians working together on various collaborative projects. The sight of former enemies sharing knowledge and expertise was remarkable, especially considering that they had been at the brink of war just days earlier. "Commander," Admiral Vexthara said, his voice growing stronger, "I formally apologize for my actions aboard your vessel. I allowed arrogance and prejudice to override my judgment as a military officer. You showed remarkable restraint in not killing me when you had both justification and opportunity." Jake picked up his plasma gun and returned it to its holster. "Admiral, you're not the first person to underestimate human engineering, but I hope you'll be one of the last to learn this lesson the hard way. I will ensure that all Zephyrian military personnel receive comprehensive briefings on human technological capabilities," Vexthara promised. "We cannot afford to repeat this error." "Good," Jake said, standing to leave. "Because the next time someone tries to steal my gun, I might not be feeling so diplomatic about it." As Jake left the medical bay, Admiral Vexthara stared at the space where the human's plasma weapon had rested. Such a simple-looking device, yet it had shattered his preconceptions and potentially changed the course of interstellar relations. The weapon had done exactly what it was designed to do: protect its user while teaching a valuable lesson to anyone foolish enough to underestimate human ingenuity. Later, on the bridge of the Indomitable Asterisk, Admiral Chen and Sub-Admiral Kexnella were putting the finishing touches on their diplomatic agreement. The Zephyrian fleet would withdraw from the neutral zone, formal apologies would be exchanged, and new protocols would be established for future encounters between their species. "Sub-Admiral," Admiral Chen said as they concluded their negotiations, "I want you to understand something about the weapon that injured your admiral." Kexnella's attention focused completely on her words. "Commander Morrison's plasma gun is standard issue for human fleet officers. Every ship in our Navy carries weapons built to the same specifications. We don't consider them particularly advanced or sophisticated. They're just reliable tools that do their job." The young Zephyrian officer's eyes widened as he processed this information. "You mean there are thousands of such weapons throughout human space?" "Millions, actually," Admiral Chen replied matter-of-factly. "And that's just our military sidearms. Our ship-mounted weapons, defensive systems, and heavy equipment are built to the same standards of reliability and effectiveness." Sub-Admiral Kexnella felt his secondary eyes dim as the full scope of Zephyrian miscalculation became clear. They had based their entire assessment of human capabilities on the appearance of their technology rather than its actual performance. The error was so fundamental that it would require years to correct. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully, "would the Federation be willing to consider a formal technological exchange program? Our engineers have much to learn from human manufacturing philosophy." "I think that could be arranged," she replied with a slight smile. "But I should warn you, human engineering tends to prioritize function over form. Your people might find our design aesthetic rather plain." As the combined fleets began their departure from the neutral zone, word of the encounter spread throughout both civilizations. The story of Admiral Vexthara's defeat by a simple human sidearm became legendary in Zephyrian military academies, taught as a lesson in the dangers of underestimating potential adversaries. Among humans, the incident became known as the plasma gun doctrine, the principle that superior technology means nothing if it cannot perform reliably when needed most. Commander Morrison's weapon had proven that human engineering philosophy was not just different from that of other species, but in many ways superior. The Zephyrian Third Fleet departed the system in formation, their crews sobered by the experience but wiser for it. Behind them, the human diplomatic mission continued its work, establishing the foundation for what would become one of the galaxy's most successful interspecies partnerships. And in his quarters aboard the Defiant Asterisk, Jake Morrison cleaned and maintained his plasma gun with the same careful attention his grandfather had shown decades before. The weapon had done its job once again, protecting not just its owner but potentially saving both species from a destructive war. Sometimes the best diplomacy came from the barrel of a gun that refused to be intimidated by anyone, no matter how superior they thought they were.